Hi, everyone. It's July 12th, and this is Talkback, and we're going to have one of our periodic reviews with our Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bisowitz. She's going to fill us in on what's happening on the state level. So I'd like to welcome her today. Good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor. Great to see you as always.
Absolutely. Nice to see you too. And I think the last time we talked, it was probably springtime, and the legislature was just beginning, and now we've sent them home. So
Right, we've got a lot to talk about, a lot to review, but we'll start with what we all feel that we're coming out of the COVID. We're coming out of the quarantine era. But I think we have to be very careful because we have to do it cautiously. So tell us, Lieutenant Governor, what's the status of the recovery, vaccine situation? Because as though we all want to be out and about, we still are somewhat worried. We've got this variant, the Delta, maybe coming along. Talk about that for us.
Sure. So look, this is the first time that we've really had to celebrate a return to normalcy, if you will, with 4th of July parades. You're in Eastern Connecticut, so the governor and I were able to march without masks at the Boombox Parade, and I marched in the Groton 4th of July Parade. There were a lot of towns and cities that had fireworks. So it really was a time to celebrate the reopening of our state and the return to normal activities, things that we weren't able to do last summer. So there are a lot of people out and about, but you're so right, we still have to be vigilant. We're doing very well. We are amongst the top vaccinated states in the country. About 70% of our population, our eligible population to be vaccinated, have been vaccinated, but we still have a lot of our citizens who have not yet gotten the vaccine. We have, our youngest citizens who are up to the age of 12 who are not yet eligible. So that is something that hopefully drug manufacturers can address a vaccine that's safe for them. And we are working on continuing to vaccinate our young people. And we are doing very well. But I think, as you were intimating, there is still work to do. We still have much work to do in our cities, communities of color, and even in some rural areas where the vaccination rate is low. So we want to continue to stress to those who haven't been vaccinated that it is really important to get vaccinated, because now the new COVID cases that we are seeing are some of the Delta variant virus cases, and that strain is highly communicable, and we want to make sure that people do not become sick with that much more communicable strain of the virus. And by the way, not to worry, if you have been vaccinated, that Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson vaccine does very much protect you from the Delta variant. And one of the reasons that we are seeing relatively few cases, way under 1%, and today we have approximately 25 people in the hospital. So our positivity rates have gone way down, and we are seeing very few people in the hospital, which is a good thing. But I just urge caution and urge people, if they're not vaccinated, to please get vaccinated, because we don't want to lose any more people. We've lost over 8,000 of our residents to COVID-19. So good news. I think one of the reasons our positivity rate is low is because we are a very highly vaccinated state, but there is still very much work to do on that front.
Yeah. So, Yeah, I am proud to be a Connecticut resident and know that we are one of the better states, but we still have a country of 49 other states that we interact with, and we don't have barriers separating us, so that we want to make sure everyone in our country is vaccinated. So, Lieutenant Governor, do you think how much of the non-vaccinated population is due to just, as you said, hard to reach rural areas, or people in the inner cities who don't have the information or are afraid of the idea of a vaccine? And how much of it is that political? We can't lose sight of the fact that we do have, based on what the ex-president is saying and others are saying, an anti-vax kind of political liberty tint to that whole issue. How do we solve that?
So it is, I will say it's a mix, Sheila. And if anybody wants to know what the vaccination rate looks like in their town, all they have to do is simply go to the state of Connecticut COVID-19 page, and you can literally look at each town and see what the vaccination rate is. And as you alluded to, I think it's a mix. I think in urban areas and communities of color, the vaccination rates are lower. And I think where you have very vulnerable communities or situations where people are working several jobs to make ends meet, those folks have less time to go out and get a vaccine. And they may be worried that if they have some of the side effects of the vaccine, that they may miss work as a result of the vaccine and therefore haven't gotten it. So I think the issues around side effects are part of it, and part of it is education, because what we've also learned from our public health research is if people go to their doctors and have a conversation with their doctors, generally whatever issues they may bring up, a doctor or a medical professional can address those issues. For instance, there are some false issues out there. There are some false concerns about whether this vaccine would affect a man's fertility or a woman's fertility, and that's not. That has proved to be a false claim, but yet there are people out there who may have some misinformation. And then there's a whole school of thought that COVID-19 doesn't exist, which I really don't understand. COVID-19 very much exists. I have visited the ICU units and seen people on ventilators. This is a terrible disease. It's very deadly, and that's why it's so important that we get people vaccinated. And so we are continuing our efforts, Sheila, with employers, and you are now seeing employers like our biggest hospital systems who are now requiring their employees to get the vaccine in order to continue their employment at their workplace. And there's also a big push within our school systems to make sure that kids are safe and families have the help that they need to get their children vaccinated, because what we don't want to happen is have kids go back to school in the fall and start this pandemic all over again. That would be moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, a couple more things on this issue. Yes. Last week we heard President Biden talk about having to really go deeper into the communities, even have people going door to door with information. Is anything like that talked about to happen in Connecticut to get more people vaccinated? And then the other.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to answer that because yes, that is already happening in places like New Haven. In Fairhaven, there are organizations that are literally door knocking, and I have been with those groups, with Spanish speakers, because Fairhaven is a heavily Latinx community. And we were door knocking and offering people the free vaccines, and, just to walk a block or two in order to get them or to make appointments for them to receive the vaccination. And other health departments in our big cities are doing that. For instance, in Waterbury and in Stamford, you have operations going on where whole apartment buildings are getting the vaccine. So people can just go to the first floor of their building and get vaccinated, or there is door knocking going on. So right now, that person-to-person operation is happening. And also our health centers, and Eastern Connecticut has some health centers in Norwich, in Wyndham, in New London, that have vulnerable communities as part of their patient base, and they are reaching out to patients, their patients on an individual basis, because they are in a position of trust. Their patients trust them to give them good, accurate medical information. And so those efforts are going on right now as we speak. And if anybody who's watching this or listening to this and wants to get a vaccination, best thing to do is call your local public health department, and they will get you information about where to go and what to do. And if you can't leave your home, they'll go to you.
Yeah. The other last thing I wanted to mention in this area was the legislature passed a law taking away the religious exemption for parents against vaccinations. Will that have any effect, do you think, on the COVID vaccination when young people are able to get it?
I sure hope not, because I think that it's important for kids to get vaccinated, both against COVID-19 and against all of those childhood diseases that at one point were eradicated, but sadly, things like measles have come back in places like Hartford because children are not getting vaccinated at rates that are sufficient to give us herd immunity in a particular school system. So we are hoping that legislation will be something that will cause higher vaccination rates, not lower ones.
Right. Hopefully. All right. So let's talk about the economic recovery. How is that coming along? What are the rate of business failures and successes, recovering, coming back? And along those lines, I know you definitely want to talk about the Equity Match Program, where you help businesses run by women, when so much of the recovery money from the federal government went mostly to males and mostly to white people. Talk about that.
Absolutely. Let me talk generally about the recovery, and then I would love to talk about the Equity Match Grant Program that I worked with our Department of Economic and Community Development to create. So first of all, the good thing about Connecticut's economy is that we kept many of our businesses, which the governor deemed to be essential. An example is manufacturing. We made sure that was deemed an essential business. So for instance, in your area, Electric Boat, Pfizer, General Dynamics, they never closed their doors. Any business involved in manufacturing stayed open. And because we have had such a good response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were able to get to a point this past May where 98% of the businesses are open, and now virtually every business is open. And we were able to do that because we had such an effective public health response. And one of the things that I think is exciting and that is contributing to Connecticut's growth is this, that because we were such a safe state, we've seen more than 20,000 new families move into our state. And that's why Connecticut has one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. So the greater Hartford area real estate market is extremely strong. Fairfield County, Litchfield County, all across southeastern Connecticut, you see homes that have bidding wars going on as soon as they get onto the market. So I think this is showing how strong of an economy Connecticut has, and that Connecticut is a safe place and a beautiful place where people want to come to do their business and to raise their families and educate their kids. So, the governor and I are really excited about that. We've just finished a very strong budget, and it was bipartisan. 31 of the 36 state senators and a good portion of both Democrats and Republicans in the House all supported this budget. And usually you don't see such strong bipartisan support for a budget. So I think that shows that we were true to our commitment not to raise taxes, which is pretty impressive given that a lot of states are in a huge amount of debt because of COVID. We are not. In fact, we have a rainy day fund that's over $4 billion. And as a result of that, 4 different rating agencies, financial rating agencies, have upgraded Connecticut's financial rating over just within the past year, and that hasn't happened in several decades. So I think that shows that our finances are strong, and we have all kinds of signs because businesses are moving here and families are moving here, that our economy is very strong.
Now,
That said, in terms of the budget, yes, and that's. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you because I wanted you to talk about some of the features of the budget that I think people should know about, namely the family tax credits, the aid to your town's healthcare, expanding Medicaid. So I just talk about a few of the features of the budget that are really helpful to families.
Yes. So we have been able to expand the child tax credit at the state level, just as our U.S. Congress, Congressman Courtney, and our delegation with the leadership of Rosa DeLauro has increased the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, which is fabulous. Towns and cities across the state are getting a historic amount of funding because of the federal funding that is out there, and because the governor wanted to make sure that municipalities and boards of education had the resources that they need. Also, our nonprofits that take care of so many of our family members got an additional $100 million in support. And we're very proud that we were able to fund municipalities with payments in lieu of taxes. And that funding is more than it's been in a long time. So this is a transformational budget that invests in people. It invests in education. We've made community college free for students, and we've invested $22 million in summer education programs and programs for kids so they can make up some of the learning that they might have lost during the pandemic, because we know that was really, really hard. And we've also invested in building up more childcare, because in order for parents to go back to work, they have to have safe and affordable quality childcare for their kids. That's really basic to our economic infrastructure. And so we were able to invest $120 million in the childcare industry in our state so that women could get back into the workforce and that parents could return to work. Because during the pandemic, many childcare centers and home daycares closed, and we lost nearly 50,000 childcare spots in our state. And to build those back up was really key for parents to go back to work. So we were really, really proud of the investment that we made in early childcare.
Okay, so we're going to get back now to the Equity Grant Match Program. I know you want to talk about it because it's a conception of yours that you're very much involved with. And last week I was just reading how you went down to Waterford in our area.
Oh, yeah.
And you helped inaugurate a grant to Ivy's Simply Homemade business. So talk about the importance of that program to help businesses owned by women in our communities.
Well, and thank you for that. And here's what Fran Pastore, who is the head of the Women's Business Development Council, and I learned when we started taking a look at where the Small Business Administration PPE money went to businesses in Connecticut, and 80% of the money went to male-owned businesses, and almost 80% of it went to businesses owned by men. And so Fran and I decided that we needed to start a state program that was a public-private partnership. So we raised $500,000 in private money from private banks, including from some wonderful banks in Eastern Connecticut, including Guilford Savings Bank, Essex Bank, Dime Bank, and others, Chelsea Groton Bank. And what we did then was we got a match of state funding. For every dollar we raised, the Department of Economic and Community Development gave $1, so it was a total of $1 million, and we are anticipating another tranche of $1 million that we will give away to businesses owned by women, and particularly women of color, who put in their own money to invest in a business. So in Ivy's case, that business had started to invest in kitchen equipment, like a very large freezer that would help her expand the food products that she sells. And so she made an investment, and we were able to give her a grant. And Equity Match Grant recipients get up to a $10,000 grant that they don't have to pay back, but they do have to invest their own money so that they have skin in the game. And it was a pleasure to see what Ivy does. By the way, she makes some delicious sandwiches, and she also makes prepared food so that it's all cooked for you. All you have to do is heat it up when you go home. So
she's a great caterer too. She does catering.
Yes,
yeah.
She does. She does. She does a lot.
Great. So do you envision this program being on a permanent basis, or something that is a temporary way to get us out of this period?
We're going to do another tranche of $500,000, and we've already raised, several $100,000 of that next private funding tranche, and that will match with $8. So far, we've made 44 grants. Ivy got one of them, totaling over $400,000 this year. Last year, we made grants to a dozen businesses for an additional 100,000, and we are doing those grants on a rolling basis. So we will continue to invest in our communities. And I think this is what's really important for people to know. When you support a woman-owned business, every dollar that you invest in that business goes back into the community, because especially when it's a woman-owned business, because that business employs people so that others can support their families. That business purchases goods and services right in the community. And so that's my message. If you really want to support local businesses that make our main streets and make our cities and towns the special places that they are, please support your small businesses. And we're trying to do that with our equity match grant program.
Is there a program to monitor their progress to make sure that they're utilizing the funds in the best way to optimize their business and the funds in the community?
Yes, absolutely. And your legal mind is at work, Sheila. And actually, each business has to propose a project, and there's an audit done to make sure that they've used the funds in the way that was approved for their grant. And further, there is a requirement that if you get an equity match grant, that you have to work with the business advisors at the Women's Business Development Council to make sure that you are getting the information and the education that you need to run your business in an effective and professional way. So that could include counseling on how to get all of your expenses in QuickBooks, how to produce financial statements, which are necessary as you continue to expand your business and get access to capital. So I can't say enough about the Women's Business Development Council. And if you're a small business person, doesn't matter if you're a male-owned business or female-owned business, they are incredible. Their clients during COVID were able, because of their help, get PPP. They were able to get the EIDL funds, and they were able to get access to some of the state programs that were available during the pandemic. So they're an amazing resource, and if you haven't discovered them, they're fantastic.
Sure. So along the lines of continuing to help women and girls, the governor, I'm sure with your encouragement and help, set up the Governor's Council on Women and Girls, and you are the chair of that. You want to talk about that and tell us your exciting program?
Oh, absolutely. So the Council on Women and Girls was one of the first official acts that the governor took. It was created right after we were sworn into office, and each one of our commissioners participate. So all of our cabinet members in the Lamont administration participates, along with our constitutional officers and representatives of our legislative branch. And what we do is we consider how we can improve the lives of women and girls. And one major way that we were able to do that this session is to pass a law that allows candidates, both men and women candidates that have children, to use part of their citizens' election funding for childcare. And this came out of a young lady in Fairfield who tried to run for state representative. She had a 3-year-old daughter, and she asked state elections enforcement if she could use just a part of her election grant to pay for childcare, as is allowed at the federal level by the Federal Elections Commission. And our state elections enforcement said, no, not allowed. And so we thought we need to change this because we need more women leaders in our state House and our state Senate and in our statewide offices. And we think that this is going to be a good step forward. And by the way, for any men out there who have young children and want to run for office and need childcare funding, that it applies to them as well. So it's just a good thing for our state because we need the interests of young families reflected in our legislature.
Okay, great. So on July 1st, many new laws that are passed by the legislature go into effect. I want you to talk about some of the ones that you think are most impactful and important. Of course, we talked about marijuana, criminal justice reform, education, funding for more mental health. We learned a lot of lessons during COVID about that in our schools. So, Lieutenant Governor, tell us what you think are some of the most important new pieces of legislation that are affecting our lives in Connecticut today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one major step forward was the legalization of marijuana. And this is something that had been considered by the legislature probably for the past 7 or 8 years. And this year it was passed. The governor and I were supporters of it for 2 really big reasons. One, if you remember back to Prohibition, not that most of us were alive then, but during Prohibition, people didn't stop drinking alcohol. Lots of people were drinking alcohol, and many people died because they were drinking alcohol that wasn't safe to drink. And the governor and I thought it's important to regulate marijuana that people are already smoking and that we should tax it. And the taxation issue was particularly important because all you have to do is drive on Connecticut roadways from Bridgeport to the Massachusetts line and see the billboards advertising legal marijuana and the purchase of it in the state of Massachusetts. So Connecticut residents are driving to Massachusetts to purchase marijuana and leaving revenue in the state of Massachusetts that Connecticut is losing. And so we wanted to address the regulation issue, make it safe for people to consume it if they choose to, and to tax it. The other big issue is this, Sheila, that marijuana laws and the enforcement of marijuana laws have disproportionately affected people of color in our state and in our country. Starting in the 1970s, when Richard Nixon declared war on drugs, we found that more people in communities of color were arrested and were put into the correction system. And whereas white young people who might have been smoking marijuana in college, but whose parents had resources to hire a lawyer, didn't go to prison. And so we wanted to address the issue of equity with respect to the war on drugs, which affected people of color much more than white people. And so that is why the governor and I were strong supporters of the legislation and glad that it passed. And criminal justice reform is also something that we looked at very carefully and were able to pass a clean slate bill so that for those who come out of prison, have paid their debt to society, and are out leading very productive lives afterward, they can get their sentences erased if they fit within the legislative parameters. So if you come out of prison after having committed a crime and for 10 years you are out being a productive, law-abiding citizen, then you can get your record cleared. And so we think that that's going to incentivize people to live really productive lives. And we think it's important because, again, unfortunately, our criminal justice laws need more equity, focus, and attention.
Okay, great. So those are the important things from your point of view in the new legislation. I know you want to talk about this Summer at the Museum program. That's very relevant right now. Tell us about it.
Well, this is a great way for families and children to enjoy the summer. And it's a great way to support our beautiful museums, historic spots, and cultural treasures. So the governor and I have a Summer at the Museum program. 90 museums are and cultural spots across the state are participating. So it's everything from the Mystic Aquarium and Mystic Seaport and the Norwalk Maritime Aquarium and the Middlesex Historical Society and Kids City Museum. If you want to see which of the 90 places that you can go, you can just take a look at the CT Summer at the Museum website and see which spots are participating. But basically it allows kids up to the age of 18 who live in Connecticut to go to one of these attractions or museums for free if they have an adult accompanying them. And this is something that we think is good for families because it'll continue summer learning, which is really important since so much of that was lost over the past year. And it supports our cultural gems, our beautiful museums and galleries and aquariums, which suffered a lot during the pandemic. And so we think this is something that families are going to enjoy over the summer. This program started on July 1st, so you have until the end of Labor Day weekend to enjoy free admission to any of these beautiful spots. And we want families to take advantage of them. And for anybody from out of state who's listening, we would love to have you come visit our beautiful museums and historic spots and take the opportunity to enjoy our restaurants, our wineries, our craft breweries. We're hoping that people take advantage of all the great things that we offer here in Connecticut.
Okay, great. So before we close today, I'd like you to tell us what's on the burner. What are you working on? What are you hoping for new programs, for new legislation, your new hopes for Connecticut over the next several months, year?
Well, we are wanting to make sure that all of the summer education programs that have been funded with a combination of state and federal funding are utilized by children across the state, because we had over 100,000 young people that didn't go online over the past year to do their lessons. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get kids up to speed and prepared. And every school system in the state has special educational programs and recreational programs to supplement those so that our kids get the learning and educational support they need, but also the socialization that everyone missed out on, and maybe even mental health and family support, because there were so many epidemics within the pandemic, and those include domestic and family violence, mental health issues, and addiction issues. So the governor and I are hoping that this is a productive educational summer for our children, and that they all get back to school and are ready to learn in the fall. And our hope also is for the people of Connecticut that they enjoy our beautiful state over the summer. I know a lot of people aren't necessarily ready to jump on a plane, but we have so many beautiful spots to visit in our state that we hope people take advantage of all our beautiful state has to offer.
Okay. Just one other topic, which is so much in the news as a divisive issue in our country yet today, and that is, of course, racism and the legacy of that. And I noted that the Connecticut legislature defined racism as a public health crisis. I want you to talk about that in terms of the importance of understanding the legacy of racism as a public health crisis, as a historical legacy, and how you can counter some of the very divisive language that is coming out of other states, out of boards of education, making very unwarranted and uneducated decisions about what kinds of things should be taught in the schools.
Well, the legislature did say that racism is a public health crisis, and the pandemic highlighted just what a crisis it is, because during the pandemic, if you were a person of color, it was much more likely that you would get sick, and it was much more likely that you would pass away from COVID than those who are white. And so that highlighted what has been historically the case, that communities of color generally do not receive the same level of health care that those in white communities receive. And so one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we did was, in the area of healthcare reform, make sure that people got the healthcare that they deserve. And we were able to use both state funding and federal funding to offer health insurance coverage to 40,000 more people. Before we made this available, there were approximately 120,000 people on Access Health Connecticut, which is our state's version of Obamacare. And now 40,000 more people, or approximately 160,000 people, have health insurance. And that is really, really important. People need access to healthcare. And we are very proud to be able to begin to address these inequities by providing it. And also, it has been our charge to our leaders of our state, in particular Deidre Gifford, but to all our cabinet secretaries, that they address inequities in our healthcare system, in education, in our child protection agency, whatever the agency. We have asked our leaders to have that equity focus so that we can begin to address the nearly 400 years of racism that has existed in our state.
And finally, I want to talk about the right to vote. Although in Connecticut, we had a good record this year, and we are not passing the kinds of discriminatory laws that make it harder for people of color and inner city people and people in rural areas to vote. I know that you, as the past Secretary of State of Connecticut for several terms, you must have an interest in this. It's a burning issue nationally in our country today, as so many states are passing these very discriminatory laws to make it difficult. What can we do as Connecticut residents? What is the state of Connecticut doing in this fight, notwithstanding our good record on these issues?
And so I'm glad you brought this up, because I think the pandemic really highlighted the importance of mail-in voting, or expanded access to absentee ballot voting. And by executive order, you might remember in the presidential primary and election, we gave people the ability to vote by absentee ballot, no matter what the reason. If you didn't want to go to the polls because you didn't feel safe, if it was just more convenient, you could vote by absentee ballot and submit that ballot to either put it in the mail or put it in one of those white boxes at a town hall. And so we were really amazed at how many people took the opportunity to vote that way in the presidential primary and in the presidential election. So we wanted to make sure for the local elections that are happening in November that ability to vote by absentee ballot remained. And so the legislature passed a law expanding the absentee ballot voting to the end of this till November, when we have the local elections. Beyond that, there will be 2 initiatives on the ballot. They will be constitutional issues. One is to allow early voting, and one is to expand absentee ballot voting to make it as it was during the pandemic. In other words, you don't need an excuse that you're out of town, that you're ill, to vote by absentee ballot. If you prefer to vote by mail, you can. Those 2 initiatives will require the people of Connecticut to vote on them. And so they won't be on the ballot in November this year in 2021, but they will be on the ballot in 2022 because of that legislation. And so I hope that people will remember that, will remember why absentee ballot expansion is an important thing to do. And the people of Connecticut will have the opportunity to weigh in on whether they would like to see expanded absentee ballot voting and early voting.
Okay, so unlike other states where the legislature can just pass a law about it, we need a constitutional change in Connecticut, right? Because of the way
Yes, we do, because for whatever reason in our Constitution, we spell out in the Constitution the reasons that you can use an absentee ballot to vote. So it will require a constitutional change. So we're going to have the opportunity to weigh in as voters in 2022 on whether we should change our Constitution.
All right. I think we've covered a lot of territory. We've gotten a great review, and we'll see you in a couple more months when more things will be happening, hopefully good for the state of Connecticut, for our people. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say to finish our discussion today?
Just to say thank you so much, Sheila, for having me. It's always a pleasure. And thank you to the people of Connecticut. The governor and I are honored to work hard for you every day.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone, for Talk Back. Goodbye, Lieutenant Governor. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Nice
Bye.
to see you.